of Winter was designed by Issac Vega and Gilmore and published by Plaid Hat Games as a semi-cooperative game set during the worst winter of the zombie apocalypse, where the players take control of a faction of survivors that have all grouped together and settled down in a bunker shelter known as the Colony to try to survive it. Each game you play will have a common goal that the players are trying to achieve together. However, each player also has their own goal that they want to achieve themselves in secret, whether it's from a harmless tick to a dangerous obsession to vengeance against the Colony. You will all have to work together, but watch each other carefully, because in the apocalypse, nothing is how it seems. I have wanted to do this review for a long time, and so I purposely took my time in gathering my thoughts around this game because I wanted to make sure that nothing was unturned. I wanted to know this game backwards and forwards, know every little bit about it, make sure I'm not leaving out anything that could possibly affect my thoughts of how the game would be, because this is a concept that I absolutely love. I love the theme of a zombie apocalypse, and I love the idea of gathering in a group trying to survive, but you're not really sure if you can trust anybody. And needless to say, going into this game, I was hyped for it. Does the hype hold up? Let's find out. I found the theme that they were going for, where you're trying to survive a zombie apocalypse in the middle of winter while also trying to balance your goal with the group goal, to be one of the most thematic games I have ever played. So many actions that you perform and the events that just happen in the game can give you that feeling of what you would do or how you would feel in a potential real life scenario. When you go out into the wilderness, leave the safety of your camp. You don't know what's out there. You don't know if there's going to be a zombie that is just waiting for you to get you. Once you get there, you're also, once you go out there, if you don't go out there without protection, you just expose yourself to the elements. You could end up getting hurt by something. You could end up getting frostbite unless you bring protection, which is where the fuel comes in. You got the fuel, you stay warm, so you don't worry about frostbite. You got the fuel, you got protection from the zombie. Now, for those of you wondering, how could I possibly have the fuel basically be a shield to everything? Think about it like this. If you were to simply go without the fuel, imagine that as if you are simply walking to the location. Obviously, you're just walking out in the wilderness into the winter, so you're obviously at risk of frostbite. And also, you're obviously at risk of maybe tripping on a rock or slipping on some ice or whatever. So you're just walking a location, you could potentially slip on something or knock something on yourself or whatever it is and end up wounded. And just like in a potential real scenario, you walk to a location, you don't even know if there's gonna be a zombie over there waiting for you, ready to bite you and end you. So if you basically just go out without the fuel, you are at risk because you are basically walking to the location. Whereas if you use the fuel cards, think of that as if you basically are taking a vehicle with you. And the vehicle can protect you from the weather. It can keep you from hurting yourself. And it will protect you from the zombies, because zombies can't really reach you because you're in the vehicle, unless you're stupid enough to put the windows down, but that's besides the point. Once you get to the locations, so much of what you can do there makes sense. If you search a location, you always have a chance of finding survivors. And if you rummage through a location, rather than just trying to be quiet and search it cautiously because you don't want the zombies to hear you, but if you're in dire need, you end up just quickly rummaging through everything because you're desperate to find something, and you can find what you need possibly, but you're now making noise, and zombies are attracted to noise, so there's a possibility that more are gonna come toward you. Also, you always have a chance of getting hurt or killed when attacking a zombie with your bare hands, obviously, because you gotta get up close and personal. But if you were to attack a zombie with a weapon, you are putting yourself in such a safer point. You are not nearly at risk because you're beating them up with either a bat or even shooting them with a gun, so you don't have to get up close and personal with them, and so you are safe. Side note, full disclosure, this is not a real bloodied bat with nails. This is a prop that I bought at a Halloween store. Plus, just like real life, you gotta keep an eye on that trash pile, because just like reality, at least for the most part, people don't like living in filth. So you gotta clean that every once in a while, because if you let that get too high, people are gonna get upset. And the more people you get upset, the worse your morale gets. Spending a die to attract zombies to you is basically just you creating a distraction, luring the zombies away from somebody and having them come toward you to take the pressure off someone who is in a dire state of need. And of course, we have to talk about the Crossroads cards. For those of you wondering what the Crossroads are, the Crossroads system was really actually started with this game. It's basically a deck of cards where on every single one of them is a condition written in a little italicized text. And on every single one of those is that condition, and if that condition is fulfilled by the player's actions during their turn, then the game will be paused and something will happen. And it will have a little mini story representing like a little event that happened in the middle of the player's turn, and then that player will be given a choice, or the players as a whole will be often given a choice on how to respond to it. And that little concept, that little deck of cards, adds so much flavor to the game. It makes the story of how the game goes much more random, much more richer. It makes it so much more unpredictable, which kind of makes sense, because in this kind of world, you never know what's gonna happen to you. You never know what's gonna happen when you go out there, or even what's gonna happen when you're back at home. And that little condition that something random, not necessarily random, because it has a condition that is caused by a player's actions, so it's not random, but a little extra event that can happen because of your actions, it can put you on edge, and it can make you cautious on everything you do. That flavor, in addition to to everything else that's going on, just makes this one of the most thematic games I have ever played. The component quality is absolutely superb. Solid, thick, double-sided tokens that are very distinct from each other. You should not have any issues telling, wait, is this a barricade or is this food? Wait, is that a helpless survivor? They are very distinct in their faces, so you should not have any difficulty telling which is which. And like I said, double-sided, very thick, so you shouldn't have to worry about bending them on accident. The standees also very well done. The outlines on the various characters of the survivors are very distinct. The zombies, they only have 3 different types, but they don't really matter that much. They're zombies. They're the antagonist. The survivors, on the other hand, have very distinct outlines on their standees, so if you are colorblind, you should have a pretty easy time still telling which character is yours just based on its shape. Also, they go in their little holders that they have for them very nicely. They sit there firmly. You shouldn't have to worry about them just simply falling out when they're out on the board. The symbology for the resource cards and the crisis cards are very clear. You should not have any difficulty determining, wait, does this megaphone belong with the tools, or is this count as something else? Wait, do we need medicine or food now? It's very clear, so you shouldn't have any issues with that. The characters, for the most part, their symbology works. There is a couple characters, for example Sparky, where they have their charisma number and their attack and search values on a whitish background, so if you are colorblind, for some of the characters you may have a bit of an issue with it. So that is something you will need to keep in mind. Thankfully though, the text themselves, those for the abilities of the characters, the requirements for the crisis cards, the abilities on the resource cards, and the cards on the Crossroads cards, they're all very easy to read. They're very very clear on what they say, so you should not have any issues with reading them. The dice for the game also work very well. They're simple 6-sided dice. They're really small, which I guess would make sense considering how much is in the box. Thankfully, they're great quality. The pips on the dice are ingrained, so you don't have to worry about them rubbing off as you play the game. All the boards are also very well laid out. The main board is very cleanly designed, where you put the colonists, where you put the food, where you put the waste, where you put the crisis and its contributions. It's all laid out very cleanly. You can see everything. Where you put the zombies, you can tell easily because every spot that can place a zombie has a little biohazard symbol on it, so you shouldn't have any issues having to figure out where you can place zombies. Same with the locations. Where you can place the survivors on the location, where you place the zombies, where you place the deck of cards that you search from, and what all you can find at the various locations is all very well laid out. The player boards are very nicely designed, and I am so happy with how they work. You have a little spot in the corners for the dice you've used and the dice you have not used, although to be completely honest, we rarely ever did that. We basically just put them in the middle of our dice pool, but regardless, it's very nice that they're there. Also, it has very clean layout to all the various actions that you can do on your turn that both require a dice and not, as well as a nice little summary of what happens each round and what happens during the colony phase of those rounds. And it also gives you a very nice reminder down in the bottom toward the middle, I believe, where at the beginning of every player's turn you have to have the player to the right draw the crossroads cards, because that is something that I admit in some of my playthroughs we have forgotten about, and that little reminder makes it very, very nice, very helpful. Overall, very, very nice components. In terms of how easy the game is to play, I would probably say it's a medium level. And what I mean by that is that the rules themselves are actually very easy to understand. The rulebook has been written incredibly well. I have yet to find any questions about the rules that the rulebook could not answer for me. The actions themselves that you can take on your turn are actually pretty straightforward. Spend a die of equal or higher value to attack or to search. Spend a die of any value to build a barricade or to attract zombies or to clean waste. And you can only move once per turn. If you move without a fuel card, you must roll a die. The exposure die, rather. I think that part of the game is actually very simple. I think the more complex notion of it, and why I give this game a medium in terms of complexity, is because there is quite a bit to keep track of. There's not a ton of stuff, but there is quite a bit that you need to keep in mind. You have to keep an eye on the trash supply, or trash pile rather. You have to keep an eye on how much food you need versus how much food you have. You gotta keep track of how many zombies are around you. You have to keep an eye on the crisis and decide whether or not you want to actually do the crisis. If you want to do the crisis, you have to keep track of how many cards have been contributed to it. That type of stuff and that many things to keep track of for some people might make this game a little bit too complex for them. If you don't have a problem with having some stuff to keep track of, then the game itself is actually a pretty easy game to learn. It's pretty easy to understand. I would think you could get a game going in maybe 20 to 30 minutes. And everybody will have most of what you need to know to learn how to play it down. I would say maybe 2 or 3 plays will be enough to have everybody understand the game fully, at least in my opinion. Also, I do think the game, depending on which scenario you play, can be fairly short, but a lot of the time it's going to be a little bit long. The shortest scenarios that you can play as they say in the rulebook, they can go from 45 to 60 minutes. and the medium and long ones go even longer than that. In all the games that I've played of this, is the short ones we've played the most often, and they've usually gone between 45 minutes to maybe an hour and a half at the most, and that's a little bit concerning, especially for those who want hardline instances of this is how long the game is going to take. So that is something you will also need to keep in mind. But overall, despite other than the things you need to keep track of and the possibility of the game being fairly long, this game is not a difficult one to learn. In terms of the gameplay, there is so much that I love about it, but there is one thing that is, I don't know, it's not really a negative, maybe it's just like a little pet peeve for me personally, and I know there's going to be a lot of people that disagree with me on this. I personally almost wish that the zombies were just a little bit more threatening, because the only danger from the zombies is really just the possibility of rolling the tooth on the exposure die when you move or kill one, and apart from that, they're never really a threat to you until there are so many just piled up on the entrances that they're basically in your face, and only then do you have to deal with them. So really, at least in my opinion, the zombies aren't as much of an antagonist, they're more of an annoyance to anything that you just have to deal with once in a while just to keep them from piling up. But that's just a minor thing. It doesn't really affect my overall opinions. Other than that, there is so much to love about it. First off, the crossroads. Once again, a fantastic concept. Just the thought of you could be doing something in the middle of your turn, and just because you made one decision, all of a sudden game is paused and just a little extra scenario happens and you are left to make a decision. And some of the decisions that you get left to make can be pretty like heartbreaking, or like I don't know what the right words is, but it just makes you really think morally of what's the best thing to do. How do you balance survival but with your morals? A good example is when I've played this game before, there have been multiple times, I don't know how this has happened, but I would be playing in a game and I would go to move somewhere. I guess minor spoilers if you haven't played the game. I would go somewhere and the game would be paused, and I would get a card read out to me, and I would discover that there's somebody out there that is desperate for help, and now I am left up to the decision whether to try to help them and bring them with me, or basically leave them to die. Those feelings and things that you have and those decisions that you make, whether good or bad, it just adds so much more to the game. Not to mention that I absolutely love the fact that every single action that you can take in the game has some level of purpose. Go into a location to try to find supplies, killing off the zombies every once in a while to keep them from piling up so that they're not a threat to you, making sure you play cards to either gain food or make repairs or whatever it is. Now, I will say there is some luck in this game with the way the die rolls for your actions will come up, and there are going to be times where you will not get the results that you want to do, the actions that you really want to do, but it actually compensates for that, because even if you can't do exactly what you want, you can still always have something to do with the dice. Even if you can't maybe search this turn or attack a zombie at this specific location, you can still do stuff. You can move out of the location to somewhere else so that the zombie doesn't overwhelm you. You can build a barricade to stop the zombies from coming in. You can contribute cards to the food supply or the crisis to try and prevent that. You can clean the waste out to try and keep the morale up. There is basically never going to be a point in your turn. In fact, you will never have a turn where you'll just be like, I can't do anything, so pass. Going back to the crisis cards, again, another great addition to how the gameplay would go, because if we had the crisis cards removed from the game entirely, then the amount of tension that would come down to the game would basically drop to basic level, and the difficulty would basically go away, because it would basically just devolve into grab as much food as you can, then do the objective and your personal objective. And there would end up really being no reason to venture outside the colony except to the grocery store and maybe the police station to grab extra supplies. You would just be able to just have somebody sit at the grocery store, grab food, and then everybody else could just hunker down in the colony and easily wait it out. Maybe killing a zombie occasionally, but even still, you would basically be able to just sit there, wait it out, not having to worry about anything. So with the crisis cards, it adds a very good challenge to the game. It makes you have to do things and make you have to make decisions that might even potentially go against what you personally want, just to have a chance of staying alive. Now, if you're the traitor, you would want the group to suffer, but you don't want to actually make that obvious, because they would then want to try to exile you, which I'll get to that later. And so the crisis cards just adds a really good extra challenge for the group to try to overcome, because without that, the gameplay would end up becoming really too easy and in turn too boring. And something that is absolutely superb about the idea for the crisis is that there are going to be times where you may have to actually let a crisis happen to give yourself a better chance. Because keep in mind, a crisis always involves resources. If you want to prevent a crisis from happening, you have to contribute resources to do it. And in the apocalypse, like this game, supplies is going to be scarce. And depending on what you have, you may have to make that moral decision of, is it worth trying to prevent this crisis? Or is it better to let the crisis happen, let us keep our supplies, and then maybe we can actually deal with this crisis later, and maybe we can actually resolve it later? Because a lot of crises in this game are varying levels of severity. Some of these crises aren't actually too severe, while others are incredibly severe. For example, a good amount of these will involve you losing a morale, which is absolutely brutal. Well, in fact, morale is the way you lose the game, usually. And there are going to be a lot of crises where if you fail, you would lose a morale, but the other effect on some of these crisis cards might not be too damaging. For example, there is a crisis card that if you were to fail it, you would actually not lose a morale, but you would add 3 zombies to 2 different locations. Depending on the situation that you were in, crises like that might not hurt you too much by letting it go. And it's things like that that really just stand out to me, and it really gives you that moral dilemma of, is it worth trying to prevent this, when if we just do maybe these just couple little things, we can afford to let this crisis happen, but it won't hurt us too bad. Hey there, it's Lou from the future speaking here. Just wanted to pop in and share my thoughts on an aspect of the game that I said I would get to later, but you don't want to actually make that obvious, because they would then want to try to exile you, which I'll get to that later. But then I forgot to talk about it, and that is the exiled cards. Now, full transparency, I have not had to use the exiled objectives often. In fact, in my times playing this game, I only remember having to use them once. That being said, I absolutely love the functionality. The fact that if you were so suspicious to the group that you ended up being exiled, whether you were the traitor or not, it does not mean you are automatically out of the game. You are still given a chance to win the game by the new objectives that you are given on the exiled cards, which means that if you were a loyal member of the group and you still ended up being exiled, you are still given a chance to win. You just gotta complete the new objective. Plus, it is very satisfying to reveal that you were not the traitor if you got exiled, to let everybody know that they basically messed up. But even if you are exiled and you are the traitor, that doesn't mean the group basically has this game in the bag and you are done. You can still win as the traitor just by beating these new objectives, and you can mess over the group however you want. And so if you are exiled, just having the opportunity to have a second chance at winning the game just makes it such a nice addition. So those were my thoughts on the exiled objective cards. Thank you so much for listening to my interruption, and now back to the review. Last point I want to get at in terms of the gameplay is the fact that in this game there is so much tension, and I think that is really fitting for a game about trying to survive the zombie apocalypse, especially in an era where you're really not sure if you can trust anybody, because you have the crisis cards you have to deal with. Well, everyone can work together for that. You have the main objective. Everyone can work together for that. But then every player has that personal goal. And that personal goal could either make you want to help the group or completely sabotage the group. And there are even times where you will have an objective that makes you want to have total revenge and betray the group as a whole. And the fact that you are not allowed to reveal your objective to anybody, meaning you will have times where you will try to perform actions that could cause some suspicion of whether you are the bad guy or not. And that questioning of, are you really on my team? Are you who's trying to help me? Or are you trying to hurt me? And the fact that you have so much you have to try to do just brings up the tension to a stress-filled mesh of a survival style puzzle that you have to try to figure out. Now, a couple things I do want to mention about the fact that there can be a lot of tension in this game is that this game can get very stressful, and for some people it can get too stressful. And so if you are one of those types of people that can get stressed out very easily and you don't want to have stress in a game, then this may not be a game for you, because this game can become a little bit too much. I've also seen a few people complain about the personal objectives. I've seen some people complain that the personal objectives artificially increase the tension, on how they basically force you to act suspicious just because you've been given a card that says to do a specific thing. I've also heard a few people talk about how they don't like the idea of the personal objectives at all, and how the idea of having to complete your own personal objective and a group objective in order to win basically is bound to end up with a situation or two where you could just have really bad luck with how the cards are drawn, how the dice come up, how the events of the crossroads will resolve, that you can end up in a situation where even if you complete the main goal, there is no chance that you'll end up being able to complete your own personal objective, meaning there is no chance that you will actually be able to win. And that fact that you could end up being put into a situation where there is no chance of winning can really sour people's experiences. I have even experienced that myself a couple times, where I get put into a situation where I know I'm not going to win no matter what. And I completely understand. It can be incredibly frustrating to just have nothing go your way and basically get yourself sealed into the losing side. But I personally think that the objectives that you have to complete personally just provide a lot more, and I think the idea of having something you have to complete that may force you to do something against the common goal and that can end up driving up the suspicion of who's the bad guy, who isn't. Is he doing this because he's the bad guy, or is it just because he wants to do something with his own life? And that suspicion that whether or not you are the bad guy or not, depending on your objective, I personally think just brings out a lot more fun. If you're looking for a game that can deliver tactics and strategies for you, I think this game can definitely deliver some of that for you. Even if there is some luck in the characters that you're drawn, the items that you can get, and the dice he's just rolling however they want to roll, but there is something that you can use to give yourself a tactical advantage. Depending on what characters that you get, you can send them to various locations that can give you an advantage. For example, the farmer. If you use the farmer at the grocery store, you get to keep extra cards, and that can help you plan of, okay, so this guy is a farmer, we're going to keep him here, we're going to try to keep him alive as long as possible because we need food. This guy is very good at killing zombies, so we need to keep this guy at the colony, make sure they are cleared out, and then anywhere that zombies start to fill up, send him over there, he can deal with them easily. And things like that. Just those little characters that you can get, depending on which ones that you do get, can really help you formulate a plan on how to best go about the game. And in terms of replay value, there is endless. Maybe not endless, but there is an unbelievable amount. There are 10 different scenarios you can play through that are actually double-sided with a hardcore mode. So really, there's 20 different scenarios that you can play through. I personally have not even played through them all yet. Also, the crisis cards. The crisis cards come up in a completely different order every game, so you can find yourself in games where you might need a whole bunch of one resource type for the majority of the game, or you can have a game where the resources that you need are spread out evenly amongst you. You can have games where maybe you just need 2 different types of resources the whole time. It all depends on how the crisis cards come up. And also, the crossroads cards, depending on whether you trigger them or not, how many will trigger, and all the different events that will happen to the game and to you, the players, are going to be different every time you play through. And of course, the secret objectives. The secret objectives, there are a whole ton of both survivor and trader objectives, and there will be likely different every single time you play the game. You're going to draw a new set of secret objectives for the players. 90 to 95% of the time you play through the game, from one game to the next, your goal will be different, and the possibility of there being a traitor or not is always going to be present. There will be some games where you may have a traitor in the group, and other games you won't. It all depends on what kind of objectives that the players draw. Overall, I found this game to be absolutely fantastic. The theme works so well, the components are great, it's not too difficult to learn. I found the gameplay to be so unbelievably enjoyable, and there's so much replay value there that I have constantly found myself asking, I want to play again. Can we play this again? And if you are the type of person who is looking for a survival type game, or even maybe a zombie game, and you're just sick of the whole stick of kill the zombies as fast as possible, you want a game where you feel like you are in a zombie apocalypse, definitely would recommend this one. I'm going to give Dead of Winter a 9 out of 10. So those are all my thoughts on Dead of Winter. With all that said, I want to know, what do you think of it? Let me know in the comments. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a big thumbs up. If you want to learn my thoughts on more games, or if you want to see more videos, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more tutorials, reviews, and unboxings. Thank you all as always so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.